record. So I'll have to interject that bio on the edited version because I didn't include it in the recording. So my reason for doing this is that like I said, I like to hear stories, but not only that, I also believe that when we tell our stories, write our stories, when we think about them or go back into our memory of situations that have happened, that is when we heal. That's therapists will have us go back in our memories and say, when was the first time you remember feeling this or thinking this thought? Whether it's causing anxiety or depression or whatever it is that you're struggling with, they will have us go back into your memory and find out when was it that happened, and kind of reverse those effects, because we develop context in our life. I'm going to mute you, Matt. It's a little bit, sorry, it's a little bit echoing. So that's I actually created a PDF to write your life story. And a lot of it is based on that. It's based on being able to think of the things in your childhood that caused whatever issues or even strength, and then how that has affected your life, and for the good or not so good. And then also changing our future. We can create our future by our thoughts, really. And so I love the reason why I chose Suzanne, I'm doing all the talking now, so it's going to be your turn really soon. I love that. The reason why I think I did mention earlier, the reason why I invited Suzanne to share her story is because of her positive energy. And I get choked up when I asked her just the other day. I asked her to tell me, so what is it about your life that you would like to share? Or I don't remember how I worded it. Have you had any situations in your life where you built strengths, or that you learned lessons? And the text that she sent back to me is all the things that have happened in her life and how they have built strengths. And I choked up. It actually made me cry to hear the things that she has gone through in her life. And so I'm excited to hear. I'm just going to leave you guys all in suspense for her to tell us her story. And if you like, you can do it however you want. You can start with your earliest memory of your childhood, good or bad memory, whatever you want to share. We're just going to embrace it all and learn from you. And then I have a handful of questions, and the people that are on this call can also throw questions in the chat. It will be easier for you to do it if you're on the Zoom call. I am going to invite you to come into the Zoom call for questions because I'm not paying attention to both. So come on Zoom if you want to ask a question. So, okay, I'm going to turn the floor over to you now. Suzanne Jensen is how she's named in Facebook.
Thank you, Sheri. Awesome. So the memory that popped into my head, I was about 3 years old, 3 years old, sitting in the back seat. And back then we didn't really, we kind of wore seatbelts, but it's not like we it's not the cars that we drive in today. But I was bouncing on the seat because I was so excited. My younger brother had just been born, and we'd gone to the hospital to pick up my mom and my new baby brother. And I was so excited to meet him. And I just remember like trying to contain my excitement as I was just waiting, and how exciting it was. And I still remember what my mom was wearing, and she's carrying the baby and she's smiling, and it was just I remember peeking over her shoulder in the car just to get a good look at him. And he became, my best friend growing up. We spent a lot of time, we also fought a lot. But we were good friends.
Brothers, you have to fight. If it's your brother, it's a necessity, right?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So I had a great childhood. Like my family, we did a lot together. We were very creative. We'd play basketball on roller skates, or we would build forts in the living room or in the backyard. And we'd attempt to climb trees. We tried to make kites because we didn't have them, and that didn't work so well. We'd climb up to places that we couldn't quite get down. And so we'd sit there trying to figure out how to help each other get down. So we got into a lot of scrapes. But one memory I remember, it was in November and it was rainy, and we were at school, and we'd just been called by the office to go home. And I met my brother there, and it was drizzly and kind of cool. And I remember walking home just thinking, why are we going home? You know, it's still school. And my brother said to me, why are we going home right now? I hope no one has died. And I just remember putting my arm around him and just comforting him, thinking, it's going to be okay. So we walked the rest of the way home, which was just a few blocks. And we opened the door, and I could see my brother standing by the fireplace, and his eyes were just red and swollen. And the rest of my family was sitting in the living room, and my brother Jeff and I were the last ones to come home, arrive home. And we were told that my sister, our oldest sister, Kristen, who's 19, she had a full ride scholarship to Utah State, had been in a car accident that morning with our grandma, our dad's mother, in Sardine Canyon. And our grandma was killed instantly, and our sister was taken to Primary Children's Hospital, and that we were to gather our things and we were going to the hospital. And it was a shock. You know, you see it happening to other people, but when it happens to you, and it was interesting to observe how different people in my family responded to it. I remember my brother he hung his head, my younger brother, he just couldn't look up. It was just hung down. And but we gathered our things, we went to the hospital, and she was on life support, and there was just a lot of waiting, and you know, what does the doctor say? And I just remember my parents we all got to go in and see her. She was super tan. She worked at Seven Peaks, which is now Splash Summit. But she was a lifeguard. She had this beautiful blonde hair. She was a beautiful woman. And so young.
Yeah.
And she was super passionate about life and about music and about Jesus. So in fact, the night before she left, she was really struggling with her Math 105 class, and she was crying. She always cried when she left because she was just very emotional, but we just loved her. She cried at Anne of Green Gables, and she cried at coffee commercials. She just cried. And we loved that about her. And she said, I don't want to go back to Math 105. I want to go on a mission. That's all I want to do is go on a mission. And at that time, of course, women couldn't go on a mission at 19. And she joked about writing the prophet a letter saying, just let me go on a mission, please. So after we had made the really difficult decision to just let her pass because her body wasn't functioning and would never fully function. Her brain activity was not there. So she would be a vegetable for the rest of her life. And we felt like it was okay to let her go. So we did. And we all felt really strongly that she just went to her mission.
Yeah.
And we had some, special experiences after she passed. I've had a few at really poignant, painful times in my life where I felt a real closeness with her, and her comforting me, and or really helping me sustain faith when I was in some serious throes of doubt. And she has been an anchor and support, even though she's passed on. And it took several months. I know it took at least a solid year before someone could mention her name and I just didn't start crying. So the grief, it takes a long time. And I know it's not the same as losing your spouse or losing a parent. I think that we all have these different experiences depending on the relationship.
Yeah.
But it made me, I think it just helped me have compassion and have awareness for when someone else is going through loss, that I feel confident that I can offer them something, some kind of support that, you know, that my family received, which we received so much during that time. Dinners and plants and cards and just a lot of love. And that was really sustaining for our family.
So good. Well, I think in situations like that too, you are able to offer not only sympathy, but empathy. You really sincerely do understand. It's loss. Loss is loss, I feel like. And I don't think anyone really ever, I don't know for sure. I don't know that there are a lot of people that say, well, it's not as bad as losing your mom, or it's not as bad as, I hope that loss is lost. Yeah. But anyway, that's still something that you've gained. So tell me what you think you have gained. What are some strengths you've gained? It sounds like empathy for sure is one of them.
Empathy is one, and just a really firm belief and testimony that families are meant to be together forever. And there's been so many, and I have more to talk about that later on, but at that time, I took a lot of comfort in my family's a forever family, and I'm going to see her again. And that confidence and faith that I felt and I continue to feel, and with all the succeeding connections I've had with her throughout the years, it's just affirming to me that when loved ones pass on, I believe they're very engaged in our lives and actively engaged in supporting the members of the family that probably need it the most. And they're looking and see, oh, this person really needs it. So they're there. And there's times when I just know, I think, wow, I can just feel her presence. And it just reminds me that it's all part of God's plan.
Yes. What are some things that people have said or done to you, or at that time that people did for you, that was especially comforting?
Just the outpouring of love. When we came home, our living room was covered with gifts and plants. There was food sitting on our stove, so we didn't have to think about dinner. People who had lost loved ones came to our home and brought us a book or something that had really helped them navigate their pain. And they shared their stories with us, and we would cry with them and feel with them. And that was incredibly comforting. And I remember we were going through my sister's things, and my mom let us each take little tokens or things that we wanted to hold on to. And I really loved that she just didn't box it up and bury it, but she let us each take a part of Kristen with us. Still to this day, on her birthday and on the day that she passed, there's a text on our family group chat of, remembering Kristen, and a picture or something that we loved about her. And so I think, sometimes we wonder, what can I do? And the grief is so heavy. And I think, it was just, you can't think about what to eat or even just some of the basic things. And so when people just show up and help with those basic things like meal times and just show their love in the way that they think feels right, it's really nurturing.
Yes, that's so good. It's always good to know. And there are times when, I've had some, family close members pass away, but not in a situation where I'm able to always know exactly what to say, or you always want to take away their pain. And I know that that's impossible to do. And I have been in pain myself. I have experienced loss. And in those moments, In fact, I would tell people there's nothing you can say or do to take away this pain. So just praying for us, just being there and hugging us, that's all. Be in it with us. I think that's maybe the answer. But okay. So that's the biggest one. I didn't prepare with Kleenexes this time. I usually do. I have anyway. So we're okay. So moving on, I want to talk. Anything more that you have to say about that or share about that, you're welcome to. And you also mentioned some situations too where you had some health concerns. And I don't know if that's the next thing you want to talk about, or if you had another thing to talk about. Yeah, bring on whatever you have. So, and it's this is another thing that I thought about when in talking with you, and it's interesting too that these thoughts just always keep coming to my mind all the time, and then I get so teary. I wonder if it's, I don't know what it is, but I do get emotional, or I don't know. Anyway, I have been thinking too that we all have things that come up and we don't always know how to deal with them, and the way that we deal with them will determine how we make it through it. So that's what I want to hear. I would love to have your help with that. When you are diagnosed with something, health conditions or whatever, how is the best way to handle it, or the thoughts that you can have, turn it over to the Lord, or whatever it is that's helped you to navigate through that as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Sheri. So I love sports as a kid. I played everything I could play. And even if it was pickup games at the park or whatever, it was just, I love moving my body. And to this day, that's still a passion of mine. And anyway, I was active in high school sports. I was playing soccer and basketball and running track. And I, about the end of my sophomore year, I started to just develop some pain that just never went away in my feet. And it started to spread to the whole foot, and partly because I was overcompensating because I was in so much pain in certain parts. So I was running on the outsides of my feet to avoid putting too much pressure on my toe joint that felt broken. I mean, it just hurt so bad. We went and had an x-ray and they're like, nothing's wrong. But I wanted to keep playing, and, then my knees would hurt, and then I was tired, and we couldn't figure it out. We went to a podiatrist. We went to, they said, well, we don't know, try orthotics. Now let's go to this doctor. It was doctor. And finally it was our last resort. We ended up with a rheumatoid arthritis specialist. And, even though the test wasn't positive, he said, all of your symptoms indicate that you have rheumatoid arthritis. So that's your diagnosis. And he said, you will probably end up in a wheelchair. Here's some medicine. And I was 17 at the time. I looked healthy and fit. But, we went to Disney World and I couldn't stand in line because my body just hurt and it was fatigued. So I would sit on the ground because I was so uncomfortable standing. And I have a high threshold for pain. I delivered all of my babies naturally. Like I really like to push through the pain.
Yes.
Anyway, so I remember my dad went and got me a wheelchair at Disney World because he couldn't bear to see me sitting on the ground. And but we tried special shoes. And the medicine did work, but I happened upon, it was a challenge that my coach gave us, to not eat sugar for 100 days. Well, I was used to eating sugar all the time. And so I was like, what? Okay. So I tried it. I messed up several times because I was used to eating sugar all the time. But that really helped quite a bit. And that just taught me in that moment, like, what I eat matters and it has an impact on my health. And I wonder what else I could experiment with. So, but I'll back up a little bit. So after that diagnosis, I was super discouraged. I just remember thinking and looking ahead for my life and thinking, what's going to happen to me? I want to be a mom. I want to have a family. I want to live an active lifestyle, and a wheelchair sounds like a death sentence to me. And I was praying one night, and I was just pouring out my heart to Heavenly Father, and just feeling so discouraged that everything that I wanted in life was probably not going to be possible based on what I knew at that time. And I just remember just praying and just telling him how sad I was about that and that loss. And I felt an amazing, just overwhelming full body warmth and comfort from that prayer. And just all of a sudden feeling that it was going to be okay and I was going to be joyful. And I thought, okay, that means I might be joyful in a wheelchair. Okay, I'll take it. I don't know what that looks like, but I'll take it. And so that was so poignant for me. And it just taught me that even when I'm sad or when things aren't turning out the way that I want them to, Heavenly Father is right there with me, and I don't have to do it alone. And so and then I, stumbled upon different ways to eat and herbs and, all kinds of alternative methods. And it's been a journey of 2 decades of me accruing a lot of information, not only from the physical standpoint, but also from the emotional standpoint. And it just stemmed from that challenge. And what's awesome is now I know a lot, and I can turn around and I help people who are like, oh, I'm struggling with this or I'm struggling with that. And I think, oh yeah, I learned about that. And so it's been a huge blessing. And I can't help but think, like, if I had never had that challenge, one, I don't think my faith would be as strong. And I wouldn't be as healthy as I am, because I had to be really conscious about what I ate over all that time period. And even though I was battling symptoms and everything like that, I feel like it's made me a healthier person because of that intervention at such a young age.
Wow. So right now, what are the kinds of things that you avoid? You avoid sugar, I imagine.
Yeah, I don't eat a lot of sugar. I just like to eat food in as close to its natural state as possible. But I also, when I was eating healthy, I had a lot of anxiety around it, because if I ate just a little bit of sugar, I'd feel the swelling and the pain. And it was very anxiety inducing. And I studied to become a health coach. So when I went through that certification process, I realized that you can be really anxious about your health to the point that you're obsessing over what you're eating. That's actually a form of an eating disorder. And so I totally backed off of that, but really focused on my emotional state when I was eating. Because the truth is, when you're eating, it doesn't matter how healthy the food is you're eating. If you're not in a relaxed state when you're consuming it, you're only absorbing about 30 to 40% of the nutrients. So I had to really work on, reducing my stress and calming my nervous system and all of those things that, so food is only one part of that. So I manage all of that. I meditate, I exercise, hydration is important. And right now I use my intuition a lot for my health. And, there's a lot of book learning that you can do, and that's really powerful. But I remember being so overwhelmed by all the different doctors, all the different healing methods, all the different diets, and so if I were to offer any advice for someone who's going through a health challenge, I would pray for guidance on what doctor should you go see, what, and really trust and lean into the inspiration of the Holy Ghost to guide you, because it will save you so much time and so many dead ends, and really help you find the healing that you're looking for, with help.
Yeah. And he will also guide you in the things that you should and shouldn't eat, because I also think that even coaches might say you should have this, and it might not be. There's people that used to coach. I don't know if they still do. Dairy, you need to have dairy. That's part of your every day. You need to have some dairy. And now they're saying, for my body is saying you can't do dairy.
Yeah. What's good for you and what's not good for you. And so, yeah, having that awareness is really important.
Yes, that's so good. Okay. So now I want to ask you about your you kind of mentioned a little bit about some of your talents growing up or your interests, extracurricular stuff. But today, tell us about some of the things that you're doing today, maybe some of your strengths if that feels like, anyway, I'm giving you the floor to do that. I'm giving you permission to tell us about you and tell us about your strengths. And the reason why I'm asking this again, is because of these experiences that we have that build it. And I know that anyway, it's so interesting, you guys, that I have learned. Tell me if you might disagree, but the most amazing, happy people, the people that are that are making the biggest difference in this world, are those who have had the biggest challenges. That's how I see it. I think that it's just like weightlifting. The people that have the strongest muscles are the ones that do work, and we lift the weights. So that's how, anyway. So you don't have to brag. I don't want you to feel like you're bragging, but interest in your strengths. You're a life coach, you're a relationship coach. You know about relationships. You know how to connect with people. You know how you have empathy. You have a faith in God. I mean, I could even say those strengths, and that these have come from these experiences that you've had. But anyway, if there's anything more that you have to say about ways that you have built some of these strengths, that's helpful too.
Yeah. Thank you, Sheri.
Oh, let me ask you this. So you can still answer that, but this is one thing that I was interested in, is how you said, when I asked if you wrote a book, what would you entitle it, and what would the book be about? That might be more of an easier question to answer than, because that.
Yeah, those are great questions. If I wrote a book, well, I wrote an outline to a book called Midlife Map, and it's the subtitle is Navigating Life After Divorce. When I go through hard things, I just feel like when it hurts so much, and I think there are people out there who are going through this and they're looking for answers, or they're just in so much pain. And what if I find the answer, or at least something that really helps me, and then I can turn around and share it with these people and help them. And so anytime I'm reading a book, which I really do love reading, I get these questions, and a lot of it is when I'm being introspective of like, why do I do that? Or why does this matter? Or, why do I keep making the same decision that leads to this end that is so painful to me over and over and over again? And so, and then I do a bunch of research on books that are going to help me come to some solid conclusions, or help me find those answers. And then it's like I'm so hungry. I just read and mark and journal and process. And to me, I feel like it's one of my gifts to just take what I read and distill it down so people can grasp it, and even explain it in a cognitive way, explain the unexplainable. I think sometimes we don't know what's happening in our body or in our minds or with our emotions. And that's a big part of our healing. And especially when you've gone through things that are traumatic. And so to be able to help a person to identify, the belief that's really holding them back from making the progress that they want to, or to identify the emotions that they keep having over and over again, that keeps them stuck, or the mindset that they have that's basically where they're dating the same person over and over and over again. All of those things, it's just the opportunity to help people identify and see what's happening, take a step back, see what's happening, and then they can make a decision, whatever they decide. Because I don't like to tell people what to do. I just like to help them see clearly enough that they can make a decision and move on it if they want to.
Yes, that's what I love about the coaches, all the coaches that I know. I mean, in coaches, you have coaches as well. It's just having someone else that can see what you are not seeing, and maybe the blind spot that you might have, or to help you to guide yourself to the place where you want to be. Just through helping you kind of introspection stuff, help you with all those. That's what I love about coaches. That's awesome. Okay. Does anyone on this call that's in here in Zoom have any questions that you guys want to ask Suzanne or Susie? Do you go by Susie?
I go by Susie and Suzanne. Both are great.
That's very good. I don't know if anyone has any questions, and I'm just throwing it at you. I didn't warn you about that. But also, it's always fun to know who is on the call in our Zoom call. There's Matt and Jamie. If either of you want to say anything or introduce yourselves, you're welcome to do that. But that puts you on the spot, and you didn't know I was going to do that, so no pressure. But it's always fun to know who's on here, who you are, and if there's any questions you have, or what was your reason for coming on here, if we were able to answer any questions that you might have had. So yeah, just raise your hand or you can jump in.
There's a question.
Okay, Matt, can you see it?
I only saw part of it. What did it say?
What's been the most surprising thing you learned recently?
Oh, good question.
Matt, does he know the answer?
Yeah, I think he might know the answer. Okay, so I've been really trying to understand this about myself. So, and it's about relationships. So I am a very, what you would call maybe a cerebral person or a cognitive person. I really like to be in my head. It's so fun because I can break things down and make Venn diagrams and lists. And yeah, it's just great. I love it. And I love words. Words are so fun. And I like to articulate things. And, you know, when I really struggled to express myself as a child. My parents actually noticed this about me. And so they had me meet with a specialist because I would just use the same words over and over again. And those words are kind of vague, like thing, really vague word. But for some reason, I was content to just use a very limited expression. And so and I didn't even really feel like I was expanding in my vocabulary and ability to express myself until I went to college. I mean, I got good grades in high school, but I didn't do so. I mean, I just did what I needed to do, but I didn't really feel like I knew things. Because of that, I'm in my head a lot. I have checklists about people, and especially in romantic relationships, of whether or not they meet the checklist. And that's a great place to start. It's not a good place to end, I'm finding. And so, you know, you can make the checklist, but there's also, you've got your heart too, right? And so we can have a checklist and we can be expressive with our mind, but we can also have a closed heart. And the closed heart, what it feels like to have an open heart is this feeling of vulnerability and like tenderness, and where we're able to express with emotion. And this is something I really struggled with, you know, throughout my marriage, is because I'd had some traumatic experiences where I had a delayed response to anger and I had delayed responses emotionally. So something would happen, it would be like overwhelming emotionally, but it'd take me 24 to 48 hours before I'd actually feel a response. And that was really frustrating to me. And so I've been really working on like having my emotions in real time. And so, and also because of some trauma I've had in, you know, in relation to my dad and to my former husband, which they had some similarities, go figure. And to where I'd like to bring people in and keep them at arm's length. And so, yep, come on in, but you got to stay at arm's length. And so one of my big ahas recently has been, to try and, yes, do the checklist, but sometimes you got to throw out the checklist and feel what's happening in here. And because if you're not doing that, then you don't have alignment, and you don't, you're going to miss something, and probably miss ever really deeply connecting with someone, because you can't stay up here and have a deeply intimate relationship with someone.
Yes, that is so good. So there's some follow-up questions that go along with that. How did you become so confident and trusting in your intuition? And then what are some things you can do to help you face your biggest fears? Those are both really good questions that kind of relate to each other.
Love it. Okay, so how can you develop trust in your own intuition? This was an exercise that I just started out with a playful approach, because when I got divorced, I was trying to, I wanted to have access to that intuition, because even when I was married, and sounds silly, but I was so out of the habit of even thinking for myself and feeling for myself that I would defer to my husband. What do you want for dinner? What do you want for this? What do you want to do? And I didn't have a sense of self at all. And, which means when you don't have a sense of self, you also you can't access that intuition either. Now, I could tap into it when we were making some major decisions, and I was able to really focus on that decision. So there were glimpses of that, but it wasn't a sustainable way of being. And so I started practicing my intuition with affirmation cards. And so I'd get a deck of cards, and I would just, ask, what do I need today? And I'd scan the cards, and I'd draw out the ones that I felt attracted to. And I read and meditate and ponder on those, sometimes journal on those. And it was interesting. The more I practiced that, the more I learned to trust it, because I was like, that's actually spot on. That's true. That's right. And, the thing about your intuition is it's tapping into where you are now. So sometimes people think, well, if you're reading that card, then that's your destiny. No, that's not how that works. That's the mindset and the thoughts. It's just a mirror to see where your mindset is, or what maybe you need in the moment, because our way of being changes from moment to moment to moment. And so I would do that every day, and I would just practice it. And then I started to practice it with, I use it in foot zoning. So when I'm about to foot zone a person, and that if you don't know what foot zoning is, it's basically where it feels like a foot massage, but I'll access all the major body systems while I'm rubbing their feet. And sometimes it is a form of energy work. You're balancing the body's energy. So sometimes there's trapped emotions, and I help them release those emotions. But before I start, I intuit which oils to choose for that person. And then I have books and references so that kind of explain the properties of the oil, and maybe affirmations that go with that oil. So when I'm doing the foot zone and they're reading about it, they're like, wow, this actually really explains where I'm at emotionally, or, this is something I'm really struggling with. I actually just foot zoned my son, my teenage son, tonight. And afterwards he was like, Mom, that was amazing, So, but the truth is, anyone can cultivate their intuition. It's just a matter of just practicing and learning to trust yourself. Because I learned that I didn't trust myself when I would go out on dates. I didn't trust myself to assert myself and say what I wanted. And I didn't trust myself to speak up for myself when I was in a situation where maybe people wanted something different than I did. And I would get so frustrated. So, learning to trust myself, just that it starts, trust yourself first, and then you're able to actually learn how to trust other people. So
That a lot of introspection in order to do that, it sounds like.
yes, yeah, but it's fun. Just make it fun. It's really fun to develop your intuition.
So Matt has all the amazing questions. He asked another one that's really good. What are some signs that you are not living an authentic life? if you're not in tune with what you really want, you're not living an authentic life. What are some
That's a good question.
She'll have to write that down and use that for her next blog post.
That's a really good question. And do you want me to answer that, or do we have time? Or okay.
If you want, you can always say, I'm going to get back with you on that.
Because that is something that I'm exploring. My whole life, I've really prized and valued authenticity because it's something that you can trust. It's real. It's open, and it allows for connection. And so it's something that I've valued my whole life. The challenge is, in order to live an authentic life, one, we have to really love ourselves as we are, where we are, and no matter what we've done or what we haven't done, that's important. And then the second part is that we have to be okay with people seeing the parts of us that we're not proud of. And I spent a lot of my adult life creating an image, so to speak, that people could look at that wasn't really me, that I would basically stand behind and let them see that image. But the problem with that is when someone gives you a compliment based on that image, you won't accept it because you know it's not the real you. And so it leaves you feeling empty and disconnected. And so for me, authenticity has been like an onion, and I feel like I'm peeling off layers, and I think, that feels so good. And then I do some more work and introspection. Oh my goodness, there's another layer. You've got to be kidding me. I thought I did so much. And there's another layer.
I can see how that would work. Vulnerability, because you can't be so vulnerable. Well, you can, but it seems like you would just, I don't know. I feel like you just crumble if you're that vulnerable all at once.
My feeling of being in a vulnerable state is this fear of like, oh no, and I don't feel so much at first, but that initial, recently I feel like I peeled off a layer, and I feel like, whew, this is really uncomfortable. And I was telling someone I was working with, who's helping me work through that, and they just said, I said, vulnerability is not my default setting. I like to be in control and, poised and, to put together. And this feels very uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's a good way to know. Okay, Matt says, is it okay to beat yourself up just a little bit for your faults and shortcomings?
Great question. I would say, well, beat yourself up. That depends what that looks like. One, it's important to acknowledge where we've fallen short. I think that's really important. But because most people tend to err on the side of not offering themselves grace, and they think that criticism motivates them to change. So they use that as the motivator, and criticism is loaded with fear and no love is in that. And it's interesting when I'm coaching people and they're like, so weird. I thought that if I was critical with myself that I would actually change. And all it does is I make change and it's not sustained, and I feel terrible about myself. And so, be honest with yourself and acknowledge, could have done that better, but offer yourself a lot of grace, show an increase of love.
Yeah, okay with those shortcomings. So Matt, and I have an answer that's similar to that I would like to add to that. I have learned that my way of answering that question would be no. It's never okay to beat yourself up ever. And it's just because, this is why I say that. I lived my whole life doing that. And I lived my whole life being debilitated too. Like I was just kind of abused. I would call it abuse, self-abuse, but it's abuse. And I didn't realize how abusive I was to myself until one day when someone in our life treated my daughter with harshness. And Mama Bear in me jumped, jumped in, and I just said, that is not okay. And I was, everything that was in me wanting to defend her. And I just wanted to protect her and jump in and hug her. And I even did say, is it okay for people to treat you like that? And no, it's not ever okay. And you should speak up for yourself. But then the thought I had after that conversation with my daughter and building her up and showing her it's not okay to accept that kind of treatment, and to show the person that was doing that too, it's not okay. But the thought I had was, this is how you should be treating yourself. This is how you should be protecting yourself like this and not allowing others to treat you. But really, when it comes down to it, the truth was made known to me that I am the one that's the abuser of myself. And so, yeah, I'm okay about jumping in and defending my daughter and helping her build this, strong self-image and have a healthy feeling about herself. And then there's me that's doing the complete opposite. So that was a huge eye-opener for me too. And since then, it's been a few years, but since then I have been really careful about how I talk to myself and what I tolerate from other people, just because it does affect me. It affects you. It actually does. If you pay attention to some of the things that you're saying to yourself, if anyone said that to you, it would just crush your heart. Sometimes you think about that. Like if I wrote down the things that I was saying to myself, if someone else told me that, I would just be crushed. But anyway, I've learned to do a little bit more positive self-talk, and it's made a huge difference. Anyway, so that's my answer. But yourself up. You're your best friend. I know you've probably heard that a million times. You should be the one person that is your cheerleader and the one person that is there for you, because that's where it all comes from, is inner self.
Yeah.
Okay. So are there any other questions? Are there any that we missed? I don't know, Matt, you had some really good ones. Did I miss any questions? Those are good. Okay, so then I will close. And if we have any other questions, oh, you have a question mark. Does that mean, Matt, do you want to speak up and express yourself more? Or are you just wanting to do one more question mark? You can you can show us your face if you want, and your microphone if you want. We would be happy. Okay, here we go. That's good. Well, Matt, you're good. I might just hire you to come to all of our calls so that you can.
That is a good question. He asked the best questions. Okay. What was the question? What are ways to face your biggest fears? Oh, boy. Well, one, to know that fear is not love. And I always want to be in a state of love. And if I'm experiencing fear, then that means I'm experiencing judgment. And it's not what's really true. What's true is love and light and grace, and all of those are real. So if I'm feeling fear, one, I pray and ask it to leave. And then I focus on what's the best thing that could happen. A lot of times we like to focus on what's the worst thing that could happen. And then we do this downward spiral.
Yeah.
And lately I've been thinking about, when you have the downward spiral, but say before you start down the downward spiral and you have this thought that, oh man, that's so scary, that thought. I like to put a sign, a detour sign that basically has an affirmation that takes me off of that downward spiral and keeps me high. So one of my favorite affirmations is, everything is working out for my highest good. And so if a what if thought comes into your mind of, oh, that's so fearful and afraid, I like to focus on that thought. Now, one of the things that I like about this is, one, it takes you off that downward spiral, so you don't keep building on negativity upon negativity, but it also keeps you in a state of higher vibration, if you will, to where you're able to see clearly, because we're not seeing clearly when we're afraid. And it just, so you don't get derailed by that fear. I actually use this when I play sports, because it's easy when I'm making errors to lecture myself of, oh, I need to be doing, and these are all things that I know. If I've studied the sport, I know how I'm supposed to hold my racket or my paddle, and I know I'm supposed to hit it a certain way. But if I start to make mistakes and I'm correcting myself in my head, okay, now I'm going to do this. Okay, now I'm going to focus on this. It just, my level of play it moves down. And so the moment I notice that I'm doing that, I start to just chant in my head, all is well, only good lies before me. Now, good means I could lose, but if I'm focused on a higher vibration thought, it totally changes the game. I get back in the game, I get out of my head, and I start using my body to play the sport the way I was trained to play it.
Oh, that's good. Does that answer your question, Matt? That's some really good advice. I love it. It is, thoughts are so powerful. And that's something that I think if people don't understand, they can just run away with their thoughts that are natural. And it even goes back to what you were saying about when you were diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, that many people would just say, it's just a diagnosis. That's just how life is. I'm just going to be like, this is how my life is going to be, and not looking for a solution and not noticing that they can actually to change some of the symptoms or some of, that's a really good example of finding a solution for all of our problems.
Yes.
So that's really helpful. Very good. Okay. Any more questions? I love it. I do have a handful more. We could just talk all night, but I am going to close. But of course, anyone that has any other questions can jump in, or you can throw your questions out. We can still answer some. But to conclude, I did want to say, okay, so first of all, how to connect with you is Facebook. Is that the very best way to connect with you?
Yeah, you can connect with me on Facebook, and I'm also on Instagram. So I have an Instagram handle I have my own personal Instagram, and then I have an Instagram handle called Midlife Map. So
and that is also the book that you've written, or that you're started to write.
The book that I need to finish writing.
Good. Okay.
What I want to teach is on the Instagram handle. So
oh, that's so good. So I have, in addition to what I have here, I believe that most people in here may know about the Thriving Singles Community. It's the private Facebook group. It's where we're streaming this call. And then also and then there's other future ones as well. And I also have, thank you, Jamie, for coming. We also have, we put these in a podcast, which is Life Stories Shared on Spotify. Actually, there's 5 different podcasts. So the audio will be on there, and then we put the video on YouTube. So there's a few different places that you can get these. So we've had a handful of stories so far. I think I probably have a dozen, and I'll be doing them on Tuesday nights. It's been so fun that I wanted to start doing it consistently. And it's helpful when you guys say it's so helpful to hear from people and their experiences, and what we can all learn from them. So one last quote I have from Brené Brown. She's one of my favorites about stories. You either walk inside your story and own it, or you stand outside your story and hustle for your worthiness. So that's something that I've always loved to do, is just embrace. They call that embrace your story. First, you write it. This is how it happened for me, is that I actually shared my story online and in my Facebook group. I shared my story before I even wrote it or thought about it. And it was the first time that I had ever really shared anything, some of the things that I was sharing. And in sharing it, I felt, they talk about the intuition, I felt some shame coming up for some of the parts of my story that I had never shared before, ever, with even my closest friends. And but I realized those were situations that were out of my control. I had no control of those, but yet I had made them my identity. And I felt like to some degree, they formed me to who I am. And so that's where I've just been kind of That's where I preach, embrace your story, because from doing that, you're living outside of that shame. You're living outside of, I wish my life was something else, like that. Like the theme of of our discussion is that, my life wasn't, I didn't sign up for this. This is not what I ordered. This is not the life I ordered. But learning from those, what can we learn from those situations and grow? In what ways can we grow? And your life will be so much more fulfilling to be able to see there is a reason. And coaches, I think coaches and therapists and people who've experienced these things, you can turn to people who have had these experiences that can tell you maybe something that you can learn, or something they have learned from similar experiences that might be able to help you gain some insights on it. So we all still have much diving in to do of our stories and sharing and such. So write your story and then embrace it with the help of experts or whoever, friends or whatever, and then share your story. And I even have a way where you can put your story in a hardbound book. Like everyone should write their stories and share them. So that's my encouragement. That's my soapbox, is to write your story, you guys, and share them with us. So
Love it. That's awesome, Sheri. Thank you. That's such a great idea. And I love that you're doing that. We all have a story to share.
Yes, I know. I love it. So I'm hoping we'll get more. We might have to do more than one a week. But anyway, well, thanks again for your time and sharing all about that with us. It was so good. And thanks you guys for joining us, Jamie and Matt. There might be some on Facebook too that I didn't see. Thank you guys too for joining. Have a great night.
Thank you.
God is in my story.